CityCast from Explocity.
All of us occasionally harbor contradictory feelings that end up generating guilt. Today, I don't want to think about the loss of two beloved friends. Double whammy. I don't want to connect the twin tragedies to myself, my own age, or the thought, it was them yesterday, it could be me tomorrow. No. I want to dress up to the hilt and step out. I have a sleek black one-shoulder kaftan with pretty mirror work on the sides, meticulously team-ironed by the lovely Lakshmi. I have carefully picked out a silver cuff, a beautiful arty cuff gifted by Raisa Hussain years ago. I bet she won't remember giving it to me. I shall wear the two new rings created by my daughter Arundhati's talented jeweler friend in Jaipur. So chic, ebony and gold with tourmaline. This is my official reason for not cancelling dinner and dressing up. I need a mood uplifter, okay? Please don't ruin it all by exclaiming, how shallow. That mood will not be easy to manifest tonight, no matter what Big John adds to the cocktail. And even if the impossibly svelte Shilpa Shetty personally serves it to me, it's got to be something else, something I'm not able to process, because perhaps it's too painful. Given that our friend circle is rapidly shrinking, if they aren't dead, they have dementia and don't recognize us any longer, the few we run into are tactless and crude. Age is the excuse for insulting others. I met such a bunch sitting around at the club, looking as sour as the limbu pani they were sipping. One of them said in an offhand manner, "Let's see your face in strong daylight. Arre, wait, I need to get my glasses on. Oh, you don't have too many wrinkles. Plastic surgery? These days it has become so common. Everybody gets a nose job, bum job, tit job. Nothing wrong in self-improvement." The rest cackled. The oldest of the lot bragged, "Look at me. I have my own teeth, no bridges or dentures, my own knees too." The one in blue with lipstick on her teeth. "Dentures were they?" Chipped in. "I too am a full original. No cataracts, no stents, no major surgeries, no hair transplants." Her friend interrupted. "Didn't you have a hernia problem? Or was it piles?" Some people are born 75.
And that was my guest today, the incomparable Shobhaa Dey. Shobhaa is one of the most famous writers in India, and her reputation has travelled everywhere. But it still behooves me to talk about the realpolitik of her literature. In other words, let me tell you why I think that Shobhaa Dey is so significant to English language writing in India. Not only was her great success as an author inspiring, but to my mind, the most significant thing that I can say about her is that she kicked down the doors for generations of women writers who followed her. She gave women's writing a unique voice. At the risk of reduction, I'll venture that her novels explore the lives and the loves of Indian women who embrace their sensuality without apology. Even if simply living their lives is often a patriarchy-fostered challenge, her protagonists are never sad victims. They follow their dreams rather than fit into society's rules and expectations, and at the fount of their sentience they will not be marginalised. I imagine that such a narrative is even possible only because Shobhaa's prose is honest. And it is very funny. But the lightness that she brings to the prose often belies the dark realities that she addresses. While most literature of the genre tends to be disconsolate, self-pitying even, the humour that I speak of in Shobhaa's narratives are a testament to her skill as a writer. For this reason, I'm sure, her writing has been the subject of almost 100 academic dissertations of researchers and scholars in universities around the world studying feminist literature. And I imagine this number is still growing. Recently, Shobhaa launched her latest book. It's titled Insatiable, And it is a memoir, a life memoir, filled with anecdotes and personal experiences, told interestingly from the perspective of food. Artfully, Shobhaa crafts a narrative using food as the conduit for descriptions of events in her life that happened around it. In literature, eating and not eating are always symbolic, and food always means something other than food. Food is a fun metaphor in literature. Ernest Hemingway used it well, as did Shobhaa's personal favorites, Zelda and Scott Fitzgerald. And now, here she is, joining me from her home in Mumbai to talk about her life and literature. Shobhaa De, welcome to the Literary City. Privileged to have you here.
Thank you. It's a privilege for me as well, and a great honor. Thank you so very much.
Let me begin by quoting the opening lines from your book, Selective Memory. Unfortunately for my mother, I was not the second son she'd prayed for. This sort of sets the tone for a lot of your writing, but you don't do what many writers do, express the same thing in sorrow and helplessness. That's not your jam, is it?
It's not my jam at all. Nor do I look back in anger.
Nice.
And there are no real major regrets. And I'm not ever going to become that crotchety old biddy sitting there and saying, oh, life's given me such a raw day. And blame everyone, blame my mother, my children, blame my friends, anyone but myself. That's really not my jam at all. I'm kind of a practical Maharashtrian middle-class girl who takes what comes with the turf, and I just get along with life.
Speaking of life, it's been 50 years?
Literally nonstop for 50 years. Now, when I look back, it doesn't really seem like 50 years at all, which is a wonderful thing. It's great because it makes me believe I've got 50 more ahead of me, which of course is nonsense, but it's a good way to feel.
Wonderful. Back to you and women. Now, you would never quarantine your women in a zanana now, would you?
Only because I would never, ever want to be a part of that quarantine zanana community myself, have never been. And I think it's disrespectful to create such ghettos, and I would never do that.
And there's no pattern to your protagonists. You never stereotype your women. But your men, they're pretty basic, aren't they? They have an on-off switch at most.
Well, yes and no. I don't think I feel active hostility towards men. They're kind of okay in that place, if you know what I mean. But the attraction has always been to understand women. They have many more challenges to deal with. They're far more complex. They are not what they appear, even sometimes. After knowing them for 10 or 12 years or 20 years or 30 years, it's like Dance of the Seven Veils. You keep thinking, oh, this is the last veil. I'm finally going to know this lady. But it has never happened so far because I like that complexity. I like the mystique. I like the idea that I can't completely decode, deconstruct. Whereas with men, it takes approximately 7 minutes. It's quite easy to figure them out.
I submit.
I don't mean it as a put down or being superior, nasty, none of it at all. It's they're lucky to be this simple. They're lucky that life gives them that privilege of just being born male. They don't have to do anything much, really, to prove anything to their family, especially in our society, in a patriarchal setup, in an Indian family. It's enough to be born a male child, and everything else appears almost like a miracle on a platter for you.
True.
What you do with your life subsequently, well, makes a man out of you or doesn't.
Right.
But scratch the surface and most Indian boys remain boys.
I agree, and most the pity. Now, your writing has quite frequently attracted the label of feminism. But that said, in your feminism, and I use this for want of a different label, to my reading of you, the feminism that you portray is not a wish list feminism. Your protagonists are natural in the way that they exercise choice. They don't wait around for male approval. They reject it, in fact, don't they?
The feminism, a lot of people have tried to make me speak about it. And it's very difficult because it was never a construct. It was not something I was determined to project in my book, and that the women have to be female warriors who are Jhansi Ki Rani, Joan of Arc, or any of that. They were, in a way, a reflection of who I am and the kind of freedoms that I have always taken completely for granted and never really waited for any authority figure to sanction anything to me. I have just done what comes naturally to me and tried to do the best I can without waiting for validation from anybody. So perhaps it's a kind of sneaky, subversive feminism, but it's certainly not the flag weaving variety of feminism to make a statement. And the protagonists in my book have lived their lives on their own terms, like they should, and they're entitled to, like 99% of the men on earth live their lives without ever having to answer questions about any of their decisions and choices.
And it is for this reason that I believe that academia picked up on you in a very big way. When I researched you, I Googled dissertations, Shobhaa Day, dissertations for Shobhaa. Now that sounds like the title of an epic song, doesn't it? Dissertations for Shobhaa.
Yeah, Beyonce should sing it.
She should sing everything.
Okay.
So anyway, I found pages of results. And as I said before, 100 dissertations is a huge number. I read 4 or 5 of them entirely, and then synopsis of a few dozen others, and I was struck by the number of references to sex and sexuality.
Yes.
Almost all the researchers said the same thing, and they, to my mind, the women, there were no male researchers that I read, they all used sex as the doorway to you. Personally, I thought that you were using sex as one method of description, but read the researchers. How does this sit with you?
Quite honestly, I have not read a single dissertation.
Yeah.
Because academia does not per se interest me, and their take on my work has no real context for me in what I do. I don't want to be influenced by it in any way. And it's too dense, and maybe they're reading too much into things which were never intended. So what is the point? But I understand what you're asking me, because the sexuality, for a lot of young professors who often approach me to seek my active participation when they're presenting their dissertation, and I've declined almost all of the time because I really don't have the bandwidth to deal with those kind of copious and rather tedious questions about sexuality. It's as if they equate sexuality with feminism, and that alone intrigues them.
Exactly.
As if a woman who is in charge of her sexual self or of sexual pleasure is in some way opening a door for them and represents freedom from some sort of shackles which they don't subscribe to, and which certainly no one should. But for me to write about it was not a self-conscious act to provoke comment or generate controversy. I just felt that writing about female pleasure was something I enjoyed doing very much. And I enjoyed reading other writers. At that stage, mainly foreign writers, women, who were writing about sex in a very beautiful, tender and poetic, lovely, sensuous, sexy way. And in India, that was almost considered taboo.
Yes.
For a woman to express any kind of view, unless she was talking about being abused sexually, then it was valid.
Right.
If she was a victim on some level of sexual oppression of some kind of rape within marriage, it was justified. But sex as just a pleasurable activity, it was considered completely out of bounds for women. And I did it in the most natural way because I wanted to write the way I wanted to write, and on subjects and matters that I wish to write on. And it didn't matter to me what others thought about.
That's wonderful. But Shobhaa, I'm going to persist a little with this researcher thing.
Yes, of course. Yes. Yeah.
I want to read this excerpt as an example. I'm going to read this to you. It's titled Lesbianism, a riposte to sexual subalternity in Shobhaa De's novels.
Don't you know what that means?
I'm struggling with it, if that's any consolation.
Yeah.
And here it is. In a heterosexual relation, the woman has to pay the price at her own cost, since she has to destroy herself, her voice, intellect, and personal development for a man's need. She is considered subaltern. On account of this, Shobhaa De rejects compulsory heterosexuality and suggests woman-to-woman relation or lesbianism is better than man-to-woman relationship.
Oh, dear.
That's some analysis.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. I mean, the book she's referring to is like a much ahead of its time lesbian psychotic thriller kind of a book about a very complex relationship between two women, one of whom is not a consenting partner.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what this researcher is trying to get at. Maybe she's looking for some kind of way through for herself in whichever relationship she might be in. But most researchers, and also at the time when I started writing, most media people who were attempting to understand my work or talk about it were very obsessive about the sex. And the sex, some of it was explicit, some was not, some was suggested, some novels didn't even contain any sex at all, like Second Thoughts. There was a few other books.
Yeah.
But despite that, if it wasn't there, I was asked, why is there no sex in these books? If it was there, I was asked, how come there's so much of it or so little of it?
Of course.
Almost like there's a quota system, and then when they pick up a Shobhaa De novel, there has to be a certain fixed ratio of sex to all the other pages. And I could visualize some of them sort of looking greedily, hungrily for where they could chance upon some sexual passage that would probably help them get it off. So
That's funny.
it amused me then. And now it's just something I don't particularly pay much attention.
I fully understand. Now, we've talked about gender and feminism. I'd like to talk about you as a social commentator. Much of what you've written about is based on middle-class values, even about the rich and famous. Even if you are rich and famous of a certain vintage, you will lean on some traditional middle-class values, won't you?
Yes, you're absolutely right. This is a class of society in Mumbai and in some of the other cities that I know quite well, the very rich and the very famous. But scratch the surface and you will find a middle class, solidly middle class and reassuringly middle class way of life, which is sometimes camouflaged with a lot of frou-frou around it.
Mm-hmm.
You may wear your designer clothes. You may have your private jets. You could have a yacht somewhere in the south of France. But at the end of the day, when you come home, what you want to eat perhaps is khichdi with your fingers. And I think our essential middle classness has been a huge strength. And it's a big, big unifying factor.
So scratch the surface of a rich and famous person and there's a real person underneath. So they do what they do because they can. And that comes across too in your writing.
Oh, and that's good. That's really coming through because it's meant to, but not as a big statement.
Right.
But having said that, when I started writing about the rich and famous in India with my very first novel, Socialite Evenings, it was the world I knew best. And most writers, their first books are very revelatory because they tend to cannibalize the lives of people they interact with, their own family or the kind of segment of society they are a part of. And Mumbai at that time, as it still is now, incredibly magnetic, electrifying, and very sexy city. It's aggressive, pushes you to the edge, but, well, most of the billionaires live within a 5-mile radius of where I live. These are people now I'm seeing for the second and now the third generation and observing the change in their kids and their grandkids. It's a world I know intimately and well. So when I wrote about it, people thought I had made it all up because before social media, before the PAPs and everything else, this world was not accessible to anybody outside the charm circle. No one knew it existed. So it was very easy to say that in socialite evenings, the reference to Malabar Hill was actually just a name I was giving to Beverly Hills, and more or less cloning what. That's where the Jackie Collins thing came up, the comparison. Merely putting Indian names to situations and locations which had nothing to do with Mumbai. They could not believe that the glitz and the parties that I described so with such aching accuracy actually were happening and taking place, but they were and they still are. And perhaps I underplayed some of it, but not a bit of it was exaggerated or untrue.
Right. From a middle class point of view, that must have seemed fantastic. Speaking of which, do you subscribe to your description of being a self-confessed, tight-assed school mom?
Well, definitely. But when my children once shocked me, and I'm not that easy to shock, when they said, "But mom, really, for all your your posturing, you're just any old Puritan with a tight ass school mom. So stop it and just start owning who you actually are, and what you write is something very different from the person that we live with." And they really threw my kind of double life at me. And that was quite a whammy because increasingly I find myself judging so many things about their lives, and they put me in my place by saying, go read some of your earlier books.
Go back and read your own books. That's funny. Well, from the perspective of being a mother, I suppose that there's a different judgment that you need to bring to the table.
Yes.
There's so much more that you need to protect. But speaking of those earlier books that your kids mentioned, how easy or difficult was it to be non-judgmental?
It was most natural. I did not think about it. I did not think, am I doing something that's very challenging? Should I watch what I'm saying? Should I keep my own opinion out of this? It was like holding up a mirror and writing about the reflection. And because I am a fairly observant person, that wasn't so hard to do.
Right.
So the characters almost came to be all fully formed. All I had to do was put them down in words and create stories around them. The stories were part fiction, part reality. So my job was really made very easy for me in that sense because there was just a lot of inspiration around. There still is.
So let's go from researchers to reviewers. Do you take reviews of your book seriously?
I take them as seriously as the person writing them.
Wow, that's good.
If I have respect for that person's point of view, I would definitely read and reread the review and chuckle over a few things, maybe feel a little bad about a few things, and then move on. I don't stay with reviews. I'm not stuck on other people's opinions of me, either about my books or my life. So it's something that I give as much importance to as I think it warrants.
And that brings us to your latest book, Insatiable. Wonderful title. It's about your life and it's told through food.
Yeah.
It was a delightful read, and I'd like to quote a passage from the book on page 76. It goes, "Now that I can afford mangoes, they no longer appeal to me. I feel superior to the mango and not the other way around. The mango needs me. I don't need the mango." Such a strange and silly game between a fruit and a woman. I just love that passage. Yes. Please explain.
Well, it's like it was the forbidden fruit, as it were, the most desired fruit when I was a young girl, because it was literally like pieces of gold were being shared with the family. And one slice of that mango would be cut up into 4 equal pieces to be shared with the kids and things like that. So the mango had a power over me, which I used to crave it and lust after it and dream about, oh my God, the mango season is about to start kind of a thing. And it used to make me feel a little powerless because I couldn't go out into the market and buy it. And couldn't gorge on it. I couldn't eat a dozen mangoes at one go if I even wanted to. I didn't have the money to do it. So today, when I look back at that period, then the mango suddenly looks kind of, it seems and appears devalued in my eyes. So it still continues to be the king of fruit and still a very desirable fruit. But my own attitude to it has liberated me from that original inferiority complex that the mango gave me. It's that expensive.
More than. I think it's a metaphor for so many things.
Yes, yeah.
And considering that this book is like a memoir
Yes.
of your life set in the analog of food, which is a very clever construct, I think it's a delightful read with so many familiar references and incidents and anecdotes. And I must ask you about the incident involving Padma Lakshmi.
Oh, gosh. Yes.
I'll do a spoiler here for our listeners. This is at the time that Shobhaa was in a sit-down dinner, and she was seated right next to Salman Rushdie, and his girlfriend of the time, Padma Lakshmi, the TV celebrity, comes over and asks Shobhaa to move, but you refused.
No, I absolutely refused to get up, and maybe, because I just felt she was being unreasonable and petulant and threatened for whatever reason.
Oh, I can think of a reason.
Well, thank you. But you cannot hog the chief guest. He's there to meet with the people who have been invited.
Right.
You have to have the generosity of spirit to share that person. Because at the end of the day, it was Padma who was going back to the room with him, and living with him. So what are we talking about? So I'm glad I did hold my own. Maybe in earlier times, I would have promptly, I would have got to my feet and say, oh, I'm so sorry, Padma, of course, please go ahead and take my place. But I'm quite happy that I didn't do that.
Now, isn't it ironic that such an anecdote involving Padma Lakshmi should be in a book about food?
Yes, given how she's wonderful at what she does and a terrific food writer and extremely appealing in every sense of the word. But it was really, the trigger was when I was writing about that, it was the day that that shocking incident and the attack on Salman Rushdie had taken place. It was in all the papers, and it had disturbed me to an extent that I still find it. When I saw a Victory City and him promoting the book with one eye, he's sightless in one eye today, and he can't use an arm. And despite it all, I mean, look at the man's courage, look at his talent, look at his energy and his thirst for life. There he is. And most people would give up under far less intimidating physical circumstances. But he goes ahead and writes this incredible book. Incredible. I mean, hats off, chapeau.
Speaking of Rushdie, you are a Midnight's child, aren't you? 1948. Same thing as 1947.
I agree. Yes, absolutely. I feel very much a part of that era because he was a Bombay boy, and all these reference points are the reference points that I grew up with as a girl in and around Beach Candy and the places he describes.
So true. So much of overlap. Now, before we go, in your reading, your last line was, some people are born 75.
Yeah.
If I was writing about you, what would I say? Some people stay 35.
Why 35?
I don't know. You pick.
Why not 18?
Okay.
18.
18.
18.
That sounds a little young.
I like 18.
Okay.
You're still precocious in Indian society. 18, you're still not an adult. You're still looking at the world with wonder and this enormous curiosity about yourself, your body, your attraction for the opposite sex, their attraction to you.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is so fascinating, and it's refreshing, it's new. By 35, you're more or less, you're a little bit jaded, a little bit cynical. You're supposed to be in full bloom, and you're supposed to be very fulfilled at that point. But fulfilled is boring and dull. I prefer 18 because it suggests untold adventures, and I prefer that.
How wonderful. What a lovely note on which to end this interview. Such fun. Shobhaa Day, thank you so much for being my guest on the Literary City.
Oh, thank you. I loved it too. And thank you for your fabulous questions. And the amount of work that you put into doing this interview. I really appreciate it because most people would ask me at the end of the interview, so madam, how do you preserve yourself? And I had to trot out the same old that I soak myself in a tub full of vinegar, darlings, and that's how I look the way I look. So I'm glad you didn't ask me that.
But Shobhaa, thank you for the beauty tip.
Don't splash it on your face, though, and don't let it get into your eyes. Just soak in it and forget about it and lie there the whole night, get marinated, and wake up looking divine.
I promise. And that was the fabulous Shobhaa Day. Her latest book is titled Insatiable, and there's a link in the podcast description to where you can buy it. And I'll be back with that fun segment, What's That Word?, where we look at words and phrases that we use all the time but never stop to think about. That right after this. And I'm back. It's time for What's That Word? And for my co-host.
Hello, my name is Pranati, but you can call me P. That's P with an A, not another E.
And hello, P with an A. Welcome back to the show.
And welcome back to you too. I was so happy to listen to your interview with Shobhaa Day. I loved it.
Oh, thank you.
All the stuff you said about her in the monologue, so much of it is a revelation to the younger crowd like me. I mean, we always read and knew about Shobhaa Day, but put into perspective.
What perspective?
Well, about what she really meant to women's and feminist literature in India.
Well, that is true.
I don't know of many of her reviewers who took the trouble to read dissertations on her.
And see where it got them.
Okay, all right, yeah, that is true.
Well, no, seriously, I was delighted to read her. I discovered so many things about her that I just didn't even know. So I was happy for the research.
Clearly. Say, is she really a Midnight's child?
Yes. She was born in 1948, so she is 75, going on 18.
Yeah, 75, can't tell by looking. Gives one hope, I guess.
Truly. Okay, P with an A, it's time to do our thing. So, what's that word?
Okay. So a few nights ago, I met my friends for drinks, and someone used the expression, shit hit the fan.
Right, and?
Well, thanks to our podcast, one of them turned to me and demanded that I should tell them the origin of this phrase, and I was a little bit stuck, so I faked it.
What? You faked it? How do you fake it?
I told them I couldn't tell them then because we were going to discuss shit hit the fan on the show. So here we are. Quickly, go.
Fair enough. Okay, let's go. Let's start with the meaning. What do you know of its meaning?
Right. So I have a question about the meaning, actually. Because personally, I always thought shit hit the fan was the consequence of something going very wrong. A real disaster. So that's what I thought. But this friend of mine in New York tells me that it's used when someone in authority, like a boss, finds out about an error and gets upset and starts yelling. So which one is correct?
Well, actually, you are correct. Shit hit the fan means something went terribly wrong. Most dictionaries, except for Merriam-Webster, but that's another day, another discussion, most dictionaries agree with you. But I think that your American pal, with his reference to a boss getting angry, might be confusing this expression with that other scatological delight. He lost his shit.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you. So, Brad, if you're listening to this, there you go, Brad. You lost the bet.
Yeah, Brad lost the bet.
So, the etymology, please?
Okay, first the origin of the phrase, shit hit the fan. Now, they say that this phrase was invented by Canadian military officers who, for whatever reason, were known for their rather colorful expressions back in the 1930s. And there are 2 or 3 articles about this, and they're very funny. But, in terms of the origins of the phrase, it can't be too old, but let's face it, electric fans were invented around the 1880s, you see. So that places the origin of the expression, I'd say somewhere in the 20th century, right?
Right.
But the first time that expression was used in print was in this novel called Gyrene by the American writer William Daniel Jones. And this was around 1943. And the phrase that he used went, having been there when the shit hit the fan.
Wow, that's cool.
Well, you know something even cooler? This guy, before he was a writer, he was a gangster, and he hung around with Bonnie and Clyde.
Really? That's amazing.
Yeah. And anyway, that phrase, shit at the fan, has appeared variously and here and there, but, you know, the word shit has got replaced with more polite things that one can hurl into a fan. You know, like soup, garbage, egg, pie, even just stuff.
You mean like when the soup hits the fan?
Yes, that is true. That's messy enough. But you can go even further right, like when the solids hit the air conditioning.
Air conditioning? That sounds just plain absurd. I mean, for one thing, nothing would fly around the room.
With a stink will.
Yeah. So I guess there's some merit in throwing solids into air conditioning.
Well, don't try it. And in this tribute to Indian history, culture, and heritage, one version has this: when the poop hits the panka.
The pointlessness of this just cracks me up. So, barring the use in 1943, the source is vague.
Yes, it is rather vague, unless fans didn't come into it, and indeed, there were people hurling dung into pankas that were pulled by ropes back in the old days. I don't know. But, you know, in terms of the origins of the phrase, such things that are rather vague in terms of etymology are often attributed to some funny explanations.
Goody. Name one.
Yeah, it's a joke thing.
Okay, I love joke things.
All right, I warned you. Okay, here goes. So this traveling salesman stops by a crowded bar, see, and he urgently needs to use the loo. You know, big job, let me warn you. And he can't find the loo. So he tries to ask the bartender, but the bartender is very busy because it's a very crowded bar. And he can't hold it in any longer, so he runs up some stairs and he uses a hole in the floor. And when he comes back down, all relieved, he finds everybody has gone and left the bar, except for the bartender, who's cowering behind the bar counter. So when the salesman asked him what happened, the bartender stands up, his arms akimbo, and replies, "Where were you when the shit hit the fan?"
Gosh. Gross. So much to learn about the aerodynamics of excreta.
Say, let me ask you a question now that we have done with the whole explanation of shit hit the fan. Why wasn't your friend Brad our guest on the show today?
I asked him, but he said he was too shy.
I'm not buying that water rubbish. No one called Brad is shy. Brads are not a shy people.
He is.
You know something? This is the case of the bullshit hitting the fan.
Okay, busted. I never asked him, okay? So, next time, Brad.
Well, all right. So anyway, that's it. So I'm going to go and find that vinegar that Shobhaa was talking about and soak in it.
I have a much better way of getting pickled. Bye.
And that is our show. I'd like to thank my guest, Shobhaa, and my co-host, Pranati P. with an A. Madhav, and you for being here and for listening and for all those wonderful letters that you've been sending us. Keep them coming. Now, before you go, for those of you who haven't, hit that subscribe button and get an alert every time we have another wonderful guest on the Literary City. See you again real soon. Bye.